Conflicting messages over Baltimore's mass shooting. Safe Streets claims workers mediated gun-related conflicts. Now another group says that was not the case. We pressed the mayor for the truth. BGE in the hot seat as they go before city council. New tonight, the questions members and residents want answered on the gas regulators that sparked a lawsuit.
But I think BG&E is pushing its weight around, and they're trying to weaken our neighborhoods.
Students as young as pre-K could soon be forced to walk more than a mile to school. Fox 45 News Project Baltimore makes parents' voices heard as they fight for their kids' safety. Baltimore continues to rank near the bottom of national polls. We take a deep dive on the impact the negative reception is having on the city and how leaders could turn it around.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 10.
Good evening, I'm Kai Jackson.
And I'm Mary Bubala. The Baltimore City Council will hold a hearing on the response to the Brooklyn Homes mass shooting tomorrow, 11 days after it happened.
What were Baltimore police and Safe Streets workers doing in the hours leading up to the shooting? When did they become aware of the shooting, and why wasn't a response triggered sooner? Those are some of the biggest questions the council hearing could uncover.
Fox 45 News demanding answers from city and state leaders. Maxine Stryker has the criticism from state's attorneys across Maryland on juvenile justice laws now that a 17-year-old is facing gun charges in connection with the incident.
Our team coverage begins with Mackenzie Frost and the conflicting messages coming from Safe Streets and City Hall.
The story seems to be changing surrounding the mediation Safe Streets workers were involved in before the bullets started flying at Brooklyn Homes. Meanwhile, Mayor Brandon Scott isn't saying anything. With the journey to healing underway in Brooklyn Homes, the search for answers continues. What Safe Streets workers did before the gunfire began remains unclear. We know 4 Safe Streets workers were at Brooklyn Day. Tuesday, the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, or MONSE, sent us a statement from Catholic Charities. That's the nonprofit running the Safe Streets Brooklyn site. According to this statement, the Safe Streets workers showed up to Brooklyn Day around 9 o'clock Saturday night and left around 11:30 when their shift ended. But the mediations by the workers are where the story changes. Catholic Charities says the violence interrupters mediated a few conflicts with none directly involving guns. MONSE telling us on July 5th, 4 unarmed Safe Streets staff responded to a scene with numerous armed individuals.
We have a motion to approve.
After a Board of Estimates meeting Wednesday morning, we tried to ask Mayor Brandon Scott about the changing gun stories. Mayor Scott, but he walked out without taking our questions. So we immediately sent an email to his office asking what we would have asked in person. What actually happened? Why are there conflicting stories? Those questions ignored. We also asked the mayor about the communication policy MONSE says it's reviewing, since none of the Safe Streets workers alerted the police or any other agency about the block party or the possible threat. We asked, will a change include requiring Safe Streets workers alerting other agencies of a possible threat? Will Safe Streets workers be required to stay at events like Brooklyn Day in the future? Again, the mayor refusing to answer. Instead, MONSE responding to our question saying Catholic Charities is now being more specific about the conflicts Safe Streets workers mediated. We have also been asking MONSE for days when that policy will change, and if it will require Safe Streets workers to alert others, and if workers will be required to stay at events later. Those questions lingering without an answer.
Everything that's happened because somebody failed.
Marcus Strider-Dent, leader of the Guardian Angels, says he wants answers about Safe Streets. The Guardian Angels is a nonprofit volunteer organization in the city working to curb the bloodshed too.
You can't have people with guns and knives and stuff and not tell the police, especially when you are funded to help with this. That's what you're doing. You're the flagship group. How can you not make a phone call and say, hey, this is going on? The program itself and how it operates, it's just not right.
Strider's concerns come after Fox 45's years-long investigation into Safe Streets, revealing cracks in accountability, transparency concerns, and questions about the program's effectiveness. And it's not just community groups demanding details.
We want to make sure this never happens again.
Councilman Mark Conway will chair Thursday's hearing into the mass shooting. He says BPD and several other agencies need to explain how the chaos unfolded.
Pieces, really beg the question for me, where was there a breakdown in communication well before 11, days before, maybe even weeks before, because you don't just host an event with 1,000 people and plan it the day before. Someone had to know this was coming.
Especially when Safe Streets workers were there 3.5 hours before the first trigger was pulled. Meanwhile, friends and family mourn the loss of Kylis Fagbemi, the 20-year-old killed after being shot at Brooklyn homes, left wondering.
I don't even know what I'm speechless at this point.
Nobody want to keep living, looking over their shoulder if they got ops, looking over their shoulder now if they're going to make it to tomorrow.
When things will get better in Baltimore. In addition to the Safe Streets concerns, there are still outstanding questions about Baltimore Police Department's response to this mass shooting. All of these things could be answered during this hearing that's set to take place Thursday evening. In the newsroom, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Well, the questions Mackenzie mentioned are just some of the issues we'd like City Council to address tomorrow. We know police knew about those massive crowds at the block party hours before the shooting happened, and we know officers were told not to go into the crowd because of a lack of backup. But was there any attempt made to mobilize more officers to the Brooklyn homes? We know Safe Streets workers were at the party before shots were fired. Did they inform Monzi about the crowd of potential threats? And between the police department and Safe Streets both knowing about the crowd and the weapons at the party, did anybody inform the mayor before the shooting? Fox 45 News will follow tomorrow morning's hearing closely. We'll bring you a full report on Fox 45 News at 10. Download the Fox 45 News app to make sure you don't miss any breaking updates.
Police haven't charged anyone for the shooting. The search for suspects continues. A 17-year-old is facing charges in connection with a gun that police say he had at the party. And there are calls for more to be done at the state level to hold juveniles accountable. Fox 45 News questioned every state's attorney in Maryland about the changes they want to see. Maxine Stryker has their response.
As juvenile crime spikes across Maryland, the state's top prosecutors are calling for change from the Maryland General Assembly, saying their hands are tied when it comes to making sure young people know the consequences of their criminal actions.
I think without question, over the last several years, the General Assembly has changed a number of the laws that deal with juvenile crime. And I think that's certainly led to some problems.
We reached out to every state's attorney in Maryland with a series of questions, including, do you believe the Maryland General Assembly has made it difficult for your office to hold juveniles accountable for criminal acts? And do you support the Juvenile Justice Reform Act of 2022 and the Child Interrogation Protection Act of 2022? Why or why not? Of the 24 states' attorneys, 9 answered our questions, and all of them agreed the General Assembly has made it more difficult to hold juveniles accountable.
Absolutely.
Including Baltimore County State's Attorney Scott Schellenberger, who takes issue with some parts of the Juvenile Justice Reform Act passed last year.
They know that, nothing's really going to happen to them if they keep their crime in a certain limit of types of crimes. So if they're 10 to 13 and they don't commit a crime of violence, they're not going to get anything. It's going to be very little, if anything, that happens.
While those 13 and under are limited to crimes of violence, a juvenile under 10 cannot be charged. The law also calls for 6 months probation for juveniles who commit adult misdemeanors and 1 year probation for juveniles who commit adult felonies.
That may not be enough time to help them with the things that they need.
The Child Interrogation Protection Act affects the ability of police to question juvenile suspects or witnesses.
So my question in the General Assembly was, what do you do with somebody like Nick Browning? He killed both of his parents. That means the gun we were looking for, if we hadn't been able to interview him, we would have still been out on the street, and we would not have been able to proceed with how we found that gun.
Schellenberger says what really needs to happen is more investment in the juvenile justice system with a focus on early intervention.
So that when we have a 10-year-old who we should be able to charge with theft, we can give that family the resources they need so that I don't have to put them in jail for the rest of their life when they kill somebody at the age of 17. And more importantly, I don't have to sit in a room with a victim's family to explain to them why this 17-year-old killed their loved one.
Maxine Stryker, Fox 45 News.
Now, Fox 45 News has heard complaints about the laws from leaders across our state for months. They say the law leaves police and prosecutors' hands tied.
To be honest, I think it's one of the worst pieces of legislation I've ever read, because what it has done is taken the process of holding juveniles accountable away from prosecutors.
Those protections have given way to a protection of some people who have committed very heinous crimes, which, yes, that does hamper what we are doing now.
It's becoming more and more difficult to hold juveniles accountable.
Basically, a lot of things that unfortunately young people find themselves getting involved in, police can no longer take action.
Well, Maxine mentioned that critics of the state's policies take issue with the Juvenile Justice Reform Act. It prevents children 13 and under from being charged with most crimes. The maximum sentence for children in most cases is probation. And then there's the Child Interrogation Protection Act. It stops law enforcement from speaking with any child until they've spoken with an attorney. Critics have called on the governor to call a special session to pass new laws to curb crime. Fox 45 News pressed the governor on that possibility this week.
Yeah, there's no plan to have a special session, and while I'm working closely with the legislature, I'm working closely with local law enforcement and local elected officials, I also know that we don't have to wait for a session in order to address something that is the #1 priority for our administration.
Governor Moore doubled down on those comments today. Fox 45 News asked the governor why he believes a special session is not necessary to address an uptick in juvenile violence, gun control, and crime. A spokesperson for the governor responded, saying in part, while there are no plans for a special session, the Moore-Miller administration is committed to working with the legislature to explore all possible options to curb the gun violence epidemic that has plagued Maryland for far too long. And that's not the only question we sent to the governor's office. We asked about funding sent to the state's attorney's offices and whether he's met with any Maryland state's attorneys and whether he believes his Safe Summer initiative is working. You can find those answers with this story on our website on foxbaltimore.com.
Well, 2 weeks ago, we asked if you think the governor should call a special session to combat violent crime. 93% of those then responded said yes. Now we're asking again. So far, 96% of voters say yes, there should be a special session. Head to foxbaltimore.com/vote to weigh in.
And you can make your voice heard if you want lawmakers to address the crime crisis. Scan the QR code on your screen. That will take you to our website. We put together a list of email addresses and phone numbers of lawmakers, including the House Speaker and Senate President.
Well, tonight, frustrated Baltimore residents are sounding off about BGE's external gas regulators in front of the city council amid a lawsuit over why the company continues to go through with installation. We're also hearing from BGE as to why they feel the regulators are necessary. Fox 45's Jeff Abel joins us live with the fallout tonight at City Hall. Jeff?
BGE told city council members tonight that its recent actions are centered around safety, but that seemed to be a hard sell at City Hall tonight.
Good evening. What BGE is doing is not required by law. In fact, it is not allowed by any law.
At City Hall tonight, there were 2.5 hours of questions about BGE's recent action to move these gas regulators, which have long been inside homes, to outside homes. And many homeowners had little or no choice but to comply.
BGE came to my neighborhood and demanded that I allow the installation of an exterior regulator.
I have no say in what's going on. It's going to change my insurance.
Residents told council members that the outside regulators are putting their safety at risk.
People hit regulators with bikes, with scooters, with baseball bats, and even buses have crashed into the fronts of homes. We're just one TikTok video away from a catastrophic trend in Baltimore.
There's more things that can go wrong when gas leaks at an indoor location.
BGE, which began installing the regulators inside homes 2 years ago, are now installing them outside, insisting they pose far less danger.
How do you get from safe inside to safe outside?
So as you said, it is more safe outside.
Why?
Because in the event that a gas leak should occur, it would vent to the outside where it can safely dissipate as opposed to accumulate inside the house.
The terms and conditions on this contract, I need my reading glasses and a magnifying glass and a microscope in order to read them.
Council members questioned whether BGE had proper permits to perform the work. In Federal Hill this month, 3 homeowners were arrested when they attempted to prevent BGE from doing the work. After tonight's meeting, there still seemed a sense of frustration.
It's very hard to sit in there and hear this.
And I got to commend the City Council for acknowledging that there are gaping holes in their arguments.
I mean, it's very clear that external installations of regulators in our urban environment are not the way to go. And unfortunately, BGE keeps pushing back, and we have to ask why.
Several residents have already slapped BG&E with a lawsuit. A hearing is slated next month at Maryland's Public Service Commission. We're live tonight. Jeff Abel, Fox 45 News.
Coming up on Fox 45 News at 10 o'clock tonight, from worst-run cities to worst places to raise a family, Baltimore is ranking among the worst in national polls. What that means for the city and how some say leaders could turn that around. Fox 45 News is analyzing body camera video of last month's deadly officer shooting, what the video shows and what we're learning about the suspect's criminal history.
High heat and now high humidity to boot. By tomorrow, temperatures getting well into the 90s. I'll let you know when we could have some showers and storms to help cool us off. That's in my Weather Authority forecast.
Coming up after the break, Howard County families are racing to stop the school system from cutting bus service to thousands of students. Project Baltimore has a closer look at their concerns.
Howard County families are in a race against time to stop their own school system from cutting bus service to thousands of students.
The school system expects students, including some kindergartners, to walk more than a mile to school. Project Baltimore's Chris Papps explains many parents are pushing back.
For these Howard County families, summer break has become a battle against their own school system.
Time is running out.
An effort fought across many fronts, and all of them will converge Thursday at the Howard County School Board meeting.
And the kids have a blast handing these out.
Sean Happel is the parent of 3 Howard County elementary students.
And there you go.
He has joined the movement to get school buses back for 3,500 Howard County students who had bus service cut by their district.
We have safety concerns, we have equity concerns, we have just a breadth of concerns that show that the policy hasn't been fully thought out.
For the upcoming school year, Howard County schools increased the distance students must live from their school to qualify for bus service. For pre-K students, middle schoolers and high schoolers, the distance was increased by half a mile. The school system, which according to the most recent data is located in Maryland's wealthiest county, will not interview with Fox 45 News, but said in a statement the intent is to ensure the efficient use of transportation, primarily because start times for next school year were changed.
Frustrating. Very frustrating.
Outrage. Shock.
Project Baltimore last month spoke with families from this Elkridge neighborhood who were told their children, some as young as kindergarten, would be expected to walk to school next year. We walked the route with them, more than a mile, along roads with no sidewalks and limited visibility.
It was a blind hill because you can't see anything as you're going down, right? That's the definition of blind hill.
Since Project Baltimore first told that neighborhood story, many more have joined the cause. This online petition demanding answers from the school system was created in mid-June. In just a few weeks, it's gathered nearly 1,400 signatures. Another online petition was started in late June, calling on the school board to reverse course and return the school buses. That petition has more than 1,300 signatures.
We're asking them just to pause for 1 year, just for 1 year, to get community engagement, to try and make sure that they're considering all aspects before they make such an impactful change to the county. We've made probably about 1,500 of these.
Apple's contribution is to make flyers which are passed out during events, including this 4th of July parade, where families marched in protest of the school board's decision. Did the county even try to work with you?
In my opinion, no.
Local business owners are also getting involved. Jared Defaba owns a school bus company that's been driving Howard County students for more than 50 years. He said if the district would work with him and other contractors to hash out wages and routes, the 3,500 students could get their buses back.
It's frustrating to me to know that we have the tools to fix it, but it's not getting done.
Well, I think our parents and our families have a right to be concerned and even frustrated.
Howard County Executive Calvin Ball has even weighed in.
But I'm hopeful that our school system, our Board of Education, is going to look and work with our parents, work with our communities to ensure that our kids can get to school safely.
Good afternoon.
On Thursday, July 13th, the Howard County School Board will hold a meeting, which many parents believe is their last chance to get their buses back.
There needs to be a change before the school year starts.
A summer of planning and fighting devoted to just one night with a result that is out of their control.
Please listen to us.
I'm Chris Pabst, and this is Project Baltimore.
Well, Fox 45 News will be watching to see what happens at tomorrow's school board meeting and bring you any updates. If you're a Howard County parent with concerns about transportation, we want to hear from you. Call the Project Baltimore hotline or email us at the address right there on your screen.
A new report shows students have an ongoing academic decline since the pandemic. The Northwest Evaluation Association analyzed 6.7 million students in grades 3 through 8 and found math scores for 13-year-olds were at their lowest point since 1990, while reading scores dropped to a 20-year low. Researchers believe students will need at least 4 extra months of math and reading classes to catch up. In Baltimore, a Project Baltimore report found 23 schools where 0 students were proficient in math among those tested. You can find more on that report on our website, foxbaltimore.com.
Well, right after the break, an actor fires back on claims his latest movie is full of QAnon conspiracies, what the critics are saying, and how the actor is pushing back.
And here we go again, more poor air quality for tomorrow. Maybe not quite as bad as today for some of us, but it's a code orange day up and down the 95 and 97 corridor. That includes Baltimore City as well as Annapolis. So if you're a part of this sensitive groups category, in other words, very young, the elderly, those with pre-existing respiratory issues, going to have to spend some extra time inside. I'm going to let you know when humidity and storms also become a part of our forecast again. That's up in my Weather Authority forecast.
Well, taking a look now at the Fox box, top left, a federal court has stopped construction on the Mountain Valley Pipeline being built through Virginia and West Virginia. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin secured assurances for the project in last month's debt ceiling deal. He's calling the ruling unlawful.
On the top right, Vice President Kamala Harris has matched the record for the most tie-breaking votes in the U.S. Senate today. John C. Calhoun set the record. Harris tied it in 2.5 years compared to Calhoun's 8 years.
Bottom left, mercenaries of the Wagner Group are handing over their weapons to the Russian military. That's according to the country's defense ministry, which posted this video showing tanks, munitions, and firearms. The turnover is part of a deal that ended the group's rebellion against Moscow.
On the bottom right, actor Jim Caviezel is firing back against claims that his latest movie, Sound of Freedom, pushes QAnon conspiracy theories. The movie earned a top spot at the box office last week. It's about a rogue government agent rescuing trafficked children. Critics say the movie promotes the theory of a global child sex trafficking ring among the world's elite. The actor addressed those claims today.
I never knew about them while I was doing this movie, Sound of Freedom. It has nothing to do with our film. But it's really interesting that they pointed to this immediately and said, that guy's one of them, he's bad.
Well, filming wrapped up in 2018. Since that time, both Caviezel and the agent he portrays have publicly expressed support for some of QAnon's wildest claims. Ahead at 10:30, police body camera footage shows how officers cornered a man during a shootout in Northeast Baltimore. Why one expert says police had no choice.
And a series of national surveys aren't painting Baltimore in the best light. One, some say, needs to change for the city to restore its reputation. We are following three big stories at 10:30. The Anne Arundel County School Board makes the decision on a controversial flag policy. Today's final ruling after weeks of heated discussion.
Police released body camera footage from a deadly shootout in Southeast Baltimore. Fox 45 News breaks down that video and the response from police.
And in national surveys of the best cities to live in, Baltimore consistently ranks near the bottom. Fox 45 looks at how city leaders can turn Baltimore's reputation around. Fox 45's Keith Daniels is taking those survey results to political and public relations experts who say Baltimore has a lot of work to do.
He joins us live with their ideas for city leaders. Keith?
Well, Kai and Mary, these surveys are coming on the heels of one of the city's worst mass shootings with 30 people shot, 2 of those people killed just over a week ago. And tonight it's headlines like that that can fuel negative reviews. Taking a look at Baltimore City, from Fells Point to Federal Hill, Mount Vernon to Mondawmin. Another round of national surveys with their rankings. 3 of them released this week, with the charm of Baltimore potentially chipped away with the city polling poorly. Political analyst Doug Eldridge pointing to city leadership as the blame.
If there's anybody that truly needs a helping hand, it's the people of Baltimore. You talk about being repeatedly sold a bill of goods. All words, no deeds, term after term.
According to a new report from Wallet Hub, the survey finds that unhealthy stress is reaching a breaking point for some residents across the country, with many residents, they say, stressed by the violence and crime in their neighborhoods. According to the survey, comparing 180 cities, Cleveland tops the list, with Baltimore coming in at number 3 as the 3rd most stressed city in the country. Another poll out with 10 cities in the U.S. that you may not want to visit because of violence and corruption. Baltimore on that list, according to the survey. Kelsey Kittner.
We have to know that they're not always accurate.
Is a senior vice president at Red Banyan public relations firm, which has offices across the country. She runs the crisis management division for the Florida-based company. Tonight, Kittner on the importance of surveys and what they could mean for cities and city leadership.
But again, I think it's really important to make sure that city officials come out and say, this is just one poll. This is not what our people, our residents, our tourists are experiencing.
PR advice when battling perception over reality.
A poll does not necessarily represent reality.
The ongoing debate over perception versus reality. We're live tonight. Keith Daniels, Fox 45 News.
Keith, thank you. According to recent census data, population decline is speeding up in Baltimore. More than 16,000 people have moved out of Baltimore over the past 2 years. From 2010 to 2020, the city lost around 35,000 people. City leaders are making efforts to revitalize downtown, but economist Aniban Basu says that's not enough.
Yeah, there's some good things happening in Baltimore City, obviously, including a refurbished arena, and people are really impressed with how the arena looks right now. Obviously, a new Lexington Market, lots of work around Penn Station, a new neighborhood at Baltimore Peninsula, so on and so forth. But population continues to decline. High crime, high taxes, concerns about the school system. And by the way, Baltimore County is afflicted with some of these same issues.
Basu argues the best way to bring people back to Baltimore is to make the city more affordable in which to live.
Baltimore police releasing body cam video showing the moments leading up to a deadly officer-involved shooting. It happened last month just near Patterson Park. Fox 45's Vincent Hill has been reviewing the footage. He joins us live with much more on this. Vincent?
Yeah, Mary, it's dark here right now, but back on June 29th, daylight as a shootout between an armed suspect and police took place on this residential neighborhood. And the law enforcement expert says police had no choice. Body camera and security camera capturing the moments an armed suspect opens fire on police. That suspect, identified as 40-year-old Daryl Gamble, wanted for weapons and drug charges, according to police. At one point, the video shows Gamble armed with a .40 caliber handgun, carrying a duffel bag across his shoulder. Gamble continuing to fire the handgun.
He then discards the weapon
until he pulls out what police say was an AK-47 style assault rifle before finally being shot by responding officers. Acting Commissioner Richard Worley.
Officers knew that he was wanted, and when they saw him, they recognized him because they've had dealings with him in the past.
Saying Gamble was no stranger to police, a known repeat violent offender. along with the charges he was wanted for. Fox 45 has learned Gamble served time for attempted murder.
This shooting was 100% justified, and the officer saved lives.
Law enforcement analyst Melissa Pinkleton says police used the amount of force needed to stop the threat.
What good is taking somebody's leg out if they still have a gun in their hand? That makes no sense.
Pinkleton says the public was in immediate danger of an armed suspect.
The suspect was shooting so many rounds, so randomly and sporadically all over the neighborhood, that it was a bigger chance that the suspect was going to hit a citizen or a child.
And that left the officers with no other choice.
They had to neutralize him. They had to stop him. There was no other choice.
Now, police say Gamble was also armed with a .357 and a shotgun that was recovered in his car, meaning he was armed with at least 4 guns. For now, we're live in Baltimore. Vincent Hill, Fox 45 News.
Vincent, thank you. As Vincent mentioned, Gamble was a repeat violent offender, according to police, and a warrant for his arrest was out at the time of the shooting. Maryland Republicans have been calling for legislation to address repeat violent offenders, but were unable to pass a number of crime bills during this year's legislative session. Senate Minority Leader Stephen Hershey wants a special session called.
But the fact that we can't even get these bills a vote in the Judicial Proceedings Committee is telling us that people don't want to fix these problems.
Maryland Democrats have a supermajority and argue gun control is more of a national issue than a Maryland issue. Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott says Maryland already has some of the toughest gun laws in the country, but homicide rates have doubled across the state over the past 8 years.
The Anne Arundel County Board of Education voted to reject a policy limiting flags in schools. It would have banned flags other than the city, county, state, and national flag from being displayed in classrooms. The decision comes after weeks of debate and protests on both sides of the argument. School board members spoke both for and against the policy before today's vote.
At its core, the policy allows for all students to feel welcome, not just the ones who see their flags on a wall. These questions are in front of us, and we are abdicating responsibility by not creating a policy.
By demanding that all differences be hidden, simply because some find them too uncomfortable to recognize, we will fail in our mission, handed down to us by Franklin and others, to equip our students for the hard, sometimes painful work that is required to continue the American experiment.
Last year, the Carroll County School Board voted to ban political flags on property, including pride flags. Students are still allowed to wear or show materials like pride flags on their clothing. The only flags permitted on school property are American, Maryland, Carroll County flags, and those related to student achievements, sports banners, and other nations.
We are learning more about a deadly construction accident along Falls Road this afternoon. It happened around 2 o'clock. Baltimore police say a man was run over by a construction zone roller truck. He died at the scene. Crash team investigators are still trying to figure out what happened. We'll update you as more information comes in. The driver charged in March's deadly construction accident on the Baltimore Beltway will be released on home detention. 54-year-old Lisa Lee was released